In this video, we're going to learn about something called a function. A function is basically like an encapsulated series of actions or statements or something else that is dedicated to doing a specific task. And you're keeping it separate from the rest of the program so that it's like you can use that particular line of code multiple times or repeatedly. Now, if this doesn't make sense to you, don't worry. I'll show you what I mean right about now. So let's go ahead and start by just creating a basic function. You always start it off by typing the keyword func. And let's go ahead and create a function that describes the steps that an airplane will take when it is taking off from the airport. So the first thing an airplane needs to do is it needs to get permission from the tower to say, hey, there's a runway clear for you to take off on. So we'll call our function get permission, like so. So there are a few things you want to take notice of. First of all, of course, there's the func keyword right here. This is the name of the function. And the name of the function will always be followed by two parentheses. We'll show you in a later video what you may want to put inside the parentheses, but right now that's a little bit too advanced for what we're doing right now. And then you also have two brackets, here and here. If you click near one of the brackets, then the other bracket will quickly highlight yellow. This will become more useful later on when you have like really complicated functions, but you can say that this bracket is associated with this bracket up here because this one turns yellow when the other one's clicked. And anything between these two brackets is basically the code that gets executed when the function occurs or happens. So we're going to do a really quick print statement that says you have permission to taxi to the runway. Now if you notice, in the console, there's nothing being printed out. What we have here is something called a function definition. It defines what a function can do, but it's not actually doing anything right now. In order to make this function do something, you need to call it. You do that by just create a separate line outside of the function definition, so out here somewhere, and just type the name of the function, so get permission, and now we'll see it print, because this statement right here calls this function and performs this action. And down here you have permission to taxi to the runway. And let's put a period right there. Let's create a couple more functions. I'm going to pause the video while I do this and then resume in a minute or so when I'm done. Alright, here we go. So as you see, I created two more function definitions. The first one is taxi. I am taxiing to the runway. And then the other function is called takeoff. The plane is taking off. And also, I call both these functions. So this statement will call that function. And this statement will call that function. And down here we have all three functions called one after another. So that's pretty simple, right? Okay, so now there is one problem with what we have right here. Whenever you're going to have your airplane take off from the runway, you're going to have the same general process. You're going to get permission, you're going to taxi to the runway, and then you'll take off. It's always going to be these three things that happen. Unfortunately, in this particular scenario, we have to call each of these functions one at a time, which we can do that, but it's really not that efficient. What we can do is we can create another function that calls all three of these functions at the same time. Did you get that? Does that make sense? Let me show you what I'm talking about. So we'll do another one, func, and take off process is what we'll call it. So what are we doing here? We create our fourth function, takeoff process. As soon as we call takeoff process, we will call these three functions automatically. So takeoff process. And just by calling this one function, we have apparently actually called all three of these functions, because we call them right here. So as a quick, flowchart of what happens, you start with this call statement, which activates that function. When this function gets activated, it performs whatever is inside these brackets. And it just so happens that this function call calls this right here. Then this function call calls this right here. And this function call calls this right here. So it's three functions in one. It's a really great way to make your code very simplified. If you have a standard process that has to happen with your program, it's usually a really good idea to make this kind of setup where you have a standard series of functions that occur every time the overall process is triggered. And keep in mind that you can call this function multiple times, as many times as you want, really. So I'm just going to copy this and paste it a few times. And as we see in the log, it's basically executed 3 times. You have permission, I am taxing, plane's taking off. Second time, and then there is the third time right there. So instead of having to copy and paste this entire text 3 times, you just have to do this text 3 times. In the long run, it's going to save space and it's going to make for much more efficient code. Now before we end, I want to bring your attention to one more thing. It's a very important topic. It's called an infinite loop. What this is when a function will repeat itself over and over and over and over again up until, infinity or whatever. So let's paste this right here. This is going to create an infinite loop. Look at the logic here. As soon as this function is called, it'll perform these 3 functions as normal, and then it'll go ahead and perform this function, which, guess what? That's going to take it all the way back up to right here, and then repeat this entire line of text again, and again, and again. It'll keep executing this function call, which keeps bringing it back to the beginning of the function, and it'll just keep repeating forever and ever and ever and ever. So let's see what an infinite loop looks like. We'll go ahead and copy this and call a function out here. And as you can see, this looping right here, it's up to 1,000 loops already, 1,700, 1,900, 2,000 loops. And if you can look down the log, it's repeating like a madman. But that's basically an infinite loop right there. I'm going to comment this out to cancel the infinite loop. Unfortunately, it's not going to cancel immediately because it's still kind of like backlogged on, loops that are supposed to, or function execution that are supposed to happen but haven't completed yet. So this is going to keep going on probably for at least a couple more minutes. But if you want to end an infinite loop with the Xcode Playgrounds, just comment out the code that's causing the loop, or delete it, like so. But that's an infinite loop. Just, watch out for those. They can sneak up on you. And we'll be revisiting this topic later on with a future video when we talk about just loops in general. Specifically a for loop. So anyhow, that's been this video. It just a brief introduction to functions. It's very important that you understand how functions work. You need to know the difference between a function definition versus a function call. Make sure that when you do call a function, like for the very first time, you call it outside of any other function. And also remember that you can call functions from inside another function. In fact, if we wanted, what we could do, and this would have the exact same impact or the exact same effect as what we did just now. We could actually call the functions like so. That would generate the same results. We could do it that way if we wanted to. But anyhow, so again, hopefully this video has been useful, and please take this to heart because it's absolutely vital that you understand functions. They're going to become extremely commonplace over the next several, well, actually the rest of this series of videos. So until next time, thank you for watching.